We're here with Kevin Keating in Donecarney, and to interview him today. So how and when did you first get involved in politics, and how did you become interested in the idea of Trotsky?
It's difficult to say when I first got interested. I left school very early, 14, and the times were quite different. Like the balance of forces between the classes were quite different. 10 million people were on strike in 1968 in France, and 15 million in Italy, 1969. So that would affect you in terms of interested in politics. I wasn't particularly interested in Republican politics because they weren't relevant to what, as an apprentice. And also, at that time, there was a tendency for wildcat strikes in Ireland. I think we were top of the league in terms of strikes. So, my interest wasn't particularly political. It was just a fact, just a way of life. That socialism was on the agenda in Europe, and someone of my age then didn't think that unusual.
And so you were involved with the Young Socialists?
Very peripherally.
Okay.
Because I was a young apprentice. The Young Socialists were mostly students, and I wouldn't have fitted in naturally. But
though Graham, the leader, he was a working class. He was an electrician, wasn't he?
So I had gone to a couple of educational events of the Young Socialists. So I got sort of interested in the wider political issues, like of the Russian Revolution and the possibility of change in Europe and Ireland itself.
And then you got involved with the Republican movement, is that right?
Later, after the pogroms in the north, the Bloody Sunday down here.
And you weren't interested in joining Sarah Era, who was more, the politics would be more similar to the Young Socialists, wouldn't it?
Possibly, yeah, but I didn't fully comprehend what was the difference between them. And, like, things were different. Like, I knew that Butch Roach had thrown the CS gas canister into the House of Parliament, but that was just a bit of fun at the time. And people didn't blink like anti-imperialism was much deeper. The British workers weren't phased out by the fact that a guy had attacked the Mother of Parliaments. The British working class supported the struggles in Africa, Palestine. So there was, as I said, a different balance of forces. So anti-imperialism was the national position for our workers both here and in Britain. It wasn't something they blinked at.
And could you tell me about, were you in Sinn Féin or?
I joined the Republican movement then, sometime after Bloody Sunday. In 1974 I was arrested with probably most Republicans in Dublin, which was something that was never clarified. I often thought about it afterwards. Within 2 months, the whole Dublin Republican movement had been scooped up. I was charged with, along with maybe 7 or 8 others, with conspiracy to commit armed robbery. we were lucky now, after 3 months on remand, the Special Criminal Court, which at that time we didn't recognise, the case was dismissed because conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Conspiracy to commit what? There was evidence of a conspiracy, but not evidence of what the conspiracy was. So we got out. We were released after about 3 months. One lad who was done for a couple of weapons, and one was done for a stolen car. Other than that, we got out.
And did any of them become prominent? Like, did any of those people become prominent in like Sinn Féin in years to come?
Prominent?
Yeah.
Martin McGuinness was in Bartley at the time. Christy Burke had been released maybe a couple of months earlier. Other than that, no. One thing about it was they were very admirable people that I met there. You can see how people become very closely knit from being locked up in Portlaoise or Lancash. They were quite admirable, and sort of brave and type of characters that you can see how it becomes very closely knit.
And can you remember the name of the Sinn Féin commune you were in?
Can I?
Yeah.
Oh, actually wasn't in one.
Oh, you weren't? Oh, you were just in the other side. Yeah, you joined the People's Democracy.
Oh, yeah. Sometime, I knew at the time that there had been contact between the Republican leadership and some prominent people down here. And I didn't cop on at the time. But in 1975, there was an agreement between the Republican leadership and the British government. They met in London. Like Adams was taken out of Lancash for this discussion. For ordinary Republicans, what we were told was that there's an agreement. We can't tell you exactly what it is, but we will eventually. And I thought, having had a history of worrying about being sold out through secret backdoor deals. This was a backdoor deal of all backdoor deals, and I found it very demoralising. And I sort of dropped out for a while. Well, I did drop out, but I didn't. I couldn't leave it behind me. Having met all these people who I found quite admirable. So while being still active, I was active without being a member of anything. And when the hunger strike loomed, I got back into some sort of action. The first they had a conference in the Mansion House because a hunger strike was threatened in Lancash. The dirty strike had been on for a long time, for a good while. And there was a sort of deadlock as to what people could do, which wasn't the first time with the Republicans where they left it to the prisoners to deal with their own stuff. Anyway, the hunger strike happened, and I had in that period, in the interim period, I joined People's Democracy because I thought they had the best position on it, which was you shouldn't go on hunger strike, basically. because it's your fate is in the hand of the Brits, and it's where they want it to be. It's they're provoking it, and the other long-term disagreement between People's Democracy and the Republicans was whether to prioritise the mass struggle or the guerrilla action, and around the hunger strike they were arguing for mass struggle, mass action, probably around the relatives first off, and then in general. And so it went. It was very wearying fight. The first one anyway, the first hunger strike, and it was a huge relief when when there was some agreement, as we thought. Again, there wasn't an agreement. The British had. I don't know who was fooled, whether the Republicans fooled themselves, but there was no agreement. What's his name? Hughes was Tommy McCartney and a few others.
The strike was called off.
They were the leadership of this, and the strike was called off. And the read afterwards was that the British had reneged on their agreement, which I mean that's what they do all the time. Which meant we had to start all over again.
The first hunger strike was so massive.
Yeah.
Their support on the streets. I didn't think after that collapse, I didn't think it'd get going again. It didn't seem possible that it would.
You'd remobilise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, from what I know, from what we've read since, there was a lot of contact in the meantime through both hunger strikes. We do nothing about it being flogging ourselves to death in the campaign.
Yeah. But the same with, I know you're in the People's Democracy, they played a big part in the elections that came during, wasn't it the second hunger strike, when they put candidates up in the south?
Yeah.
And others.
But Bernadette.
Yeah, Bernadette's still in Dublin.
In this area. This was Hardy's constituency at the time, and Bernadette stood it. I think Hardy got it Friday. He didn't know what the outcome would be. So they were quite vicious. I mean, there was he had his usual after mass meeting across the road, and some of the comrades were there, and they were denouncing Hardy. But some of he always had a few tugs around him, and they cut the wires from the from the speakers.
Bernadette did well. She got a good vote that time.
She got a good vote.
Yeah.
But I don't think she wanted to repeat the experience.
I campaigned for Tony O'Hara on the other side of the city.
Yeah. It was quite a different time. As I said at the beginning, about May '68 in France, de Gaulle went to Germany to seek his NATO troops going to be loyal. I mean, they were frightened. Agnelli and his family made preparations to leave Italy. So there was 15 million people on strike. All the Fiat factories were occupied.
Yeah.
So there was more happening than the Republican struggle.
Oh yeah.
It's just that it was such a political slum. Yeah. And loyalism. There were such a bunch of thugs that it became prominent, and the class element wasn't really discussed, how we fit into the overall European thing. We needed to think about that. Could there be any resolution within the partition slum that both states were. That was never discussed really.
You are currently involved with Social Democracy. Could you tell me about this, and could you tell me about the Irish section of the Fourth International?
Oh, yeah. Well, after the hunger strike, the People's Democracy split fairly severely, and most went with the Republicans because they seen that the Republicans were going to the left. It turned out to be a miscalculation, to say the least. They were going to the right.
Yeah, in the long term, yeah.
And they read things different than we did. They insisted that the hunger strike was a victory, whereas we said no, it wasn't. None of the British government had decided to fight on the prisoners, and they reeled in the Republican movement. As regards to the Fourth International, it's a very tiny organisation, and it can't. You really can't make a global judgment on global politics from very small organisations. That's proved, and also from the time of the late 60s, they had a fascination with guerrillism arising out of the Cuban experience, but the Cuban experience didn't prove to be a role model.
Yeah, I think Guevara, wasn't it? Guevara had an influence on everybody.
It didn't prove to be a role model in any sense. So a lot of serious revolutionaries died in Argentina, Uruguay, trying to replicate Cuban. There's a few other countries I can't recall now. And I haven't really thought about it anyway deeply, but the core working class in Europe was in retreat as well. And the Fourth International, as far as we were concerned, was quite hostile to our disagreement with them. So we have a fragile relationship, to say the least. I just regress a little bit to what I mentioned earlier about how people seen the trade union movement as beginning the process of national pay agreements and then moving on to social partnership, which was a delusion that there was no class struggle. But there was an element of convergence which people didn't notice too much. Like Phil Flynn was the General Secretary of, what did he call it, Evictu. Impact. He was also the of ICTU, top of ICTU.
And he was a big Sinn Féin person.
And then at the same time, he was the vice president. He was the vice president. He was the president of ICTU, and he was the vice president of Sinn Féin. So you had the two things coming together. In 1979, he had orchestrated the campaign for social partnership. He was the front man, and he'd also obviously been involved in the backdoor deals with Fianna Fáil. In fact, one of the things I remember well from the debate about social partnership was he said if you didn't come to an agreement with Fianna Fáil, we would have the most right-wing government ever, which would be the Fine Gael and the Progressive Democrats. Instead we had Fianna Fáil and the Progressive Democrats, and Mary Arney was made Minister for Health. So there was that convergence of sellout on the industrial level and also on the national struggle. And Phil Flynn was at the centre of both. And nobody really noticed it, except if you come up against him. He was a fairly aggressive debater.
He came out of the Irish Workers' Group.
Yeah.
You know, with Jerry Lawless and people like that.
Yeah, he was a long time away from that this stage. But just to remind you that there was a convergence on both fields of struggle, and Phil Flynn was the fixer. My own union, the members worked in the Irish Water, not Irish Water, the waterworks, and they were being transferred from the waterworks into Irish Water with the connivance and permission of the union, and that we should concentrate on that. Brendan Ogle was there. Brendan Ogle wasn't too pleased, and he was protected. But you know, how can you be on both sides of the fence all the time? With the connivance and permission of the union, and that we should concentrate on that. Brendan Ogle was there. Brendan Ogle wasn't too pleased, and he was protected. But you know, how can you be on both sides of the fence all the time? And they just thought I was crazy. But, I mean, what was Jim Larkin about? What, you know, Connolly about, except blacking tainted goods. It had been the same as regards to the property charges. The property charges were initially delivered by Dublin City Council, and the council workers were brought in on Saturday to get them out to people. How can you be? That's giving them your approval. But the campaign decided that they'd be better off picketing Fine Gael than dealing with a union that was working Saturday to get.
And what were they delivering, the bills, was it? Or?
Bills.
Oh, were they? Okay.
The offices were open actually extra time on the Saturday, whilst there was a national demonstration for the Fine Gael conference. So there was no link made between.
Okay.
The workers were processing them or on overtime.
But that's how the consciousness doesn't exist anymore.
But the thing about the campaign against the water charges, after the campaign against the housing tax, ordinary people around the country, certainly where I live in Kildare, they ran the campaigns. They didn't want the different political people who had made a mess of the campaign against the housing tax. That's why the campaign against water charges was so good. Ordinary people took to the streets, they took control.
Yeah, but that was what made it successful.
Yeah.
Because they were the ones who were actually
Yeah.
in charge of it, because they were just disenchanted with it.
That's it, yeah.
And my problem, I've already said it at the meetings in town, in Teacher Club, that
The local council elections.
sorry,
In the local
that the local elections, the whole point of the water charges and the privatisation of water is that we have this bill to bail out the European banks, and they look at the balance if we're overspending outside what the fiscal space, we spend outside this fiscal space, the European banks will come down on top of us. So you're standing in an election in which the bottom line for the European banks is that the water system has to be there to be sold in order to pay the banks
bank
bank debt.
Yeah.
So the bottom line for the left standing in the council elections should have been the question of asset stripping. And it should have been for the water charges. The water charges were great in terms of the mobilisation, but what was behind them all? What was behind it all was the asset stripping of huge resources that we're standing on. The water system is a massive resource, and it's been asset stripped. You can vote in as many council elections as you like, but the likes of Owen Keegan and the other city managers make all the decisions. Now that's a question of democracy. It's a question of democracy going back to the Greek times, where the city was run by the senators that were elected. It's a question of democracy going back 50 years, where the people in Derry couldn't put in a council that represented them. Now we can't put in a council that represents us. You put in a council, but they can do nothing because Owen Keegan overrides them.
Yeah, he can close down the council.
He can also, yeah. So why weren't they standing on the common platform? I mean, the difference between them wasn't even there that you could discuss it. Anyway, we're talking too much.
Yeah, that's good. Kevin?
Yeah, I didn't really know Peter. I just seen him from meetings from a distance, so I can't say I have anything to say about his personality. But he was quite impressive, and I was at his funeral because I recognised that he was a fairly special person. But just that time, people talking about how much preferment there was both here and internationally. I think that had an effect. You have to see that had an effect on how people reacted, and we were swayed by events. I remember at that time there was groups like the Tupamardas in Argentina, Uruguay, stopping trains full of food and distributing it to the poor. The guerrillism was in the air very much so, not just in terms of traditions in Ireland, but it was globally. And the Vietnam War was happening at the time, which is much more significant than these folky groups in Latin America. But that wave passed, and the Fourth International was influenced by that, and they actually had an orientation towards towards guerrillism, which turned out to be a big mistake, because they were defeated, but there was still the working class. But